So who are the targets for APTs, right? So that's a very common question which comes to, I think, so everybody's mind that, why would, what is the target here? Am I, as a small company or a large company, who is the target, right? So every single sector among industries, okay? So everybody can be a target. That's what I say. So it doesn't matter. You could be of interest to any part. Or sometimes what happens is, a lot of these nation-state attacks, they use you as a stepping stone to get into other systems, right? So they could come, sit in your system, overtake your system without you knowing it, and then try to get to the government or to other, sectors or something, right? So in the past, usually the APTs or the targets of APTs were mostly government, public sectors, manufacturing, finance organizations, but nowadays it is as long as you have some interest for a specific hacking group, they're going to basically come get you, target you, of course. So you got to be always, you got to have knowledge from both standpoints, as a defender and also from a hacker standpoint, which I'll, which in this whole course, I'll be making you more and more familiar with it, all right? So obviously, when you're using zero-day attacks, or zero-day bugs, as I described, 0 days, these are these vulnerabilities, sorry. Before they even, there's also sometimes very valuable, right? Because they are not been discovered. So there are thousands of dollars that APT hackers organization pay to get a 0 day in order to break into a system without being detected. So 0 days, these are these vulnerabilities which I told you about earlier. I hope you remember it. So hackers, they actually go, there are these darknet forums where basically they go and buy these 0 days, and once they have it, then they write the piece of malware based on that 0 day, based on the operating system where the 0 day is targeting that vulnerability, that hole which it opens, and then they launch an attack to a specific group of companies based on the 0 days. So they don't even need to have a 0 day which is known to their company, and they just use them and buy them from the market, and this is not a market which you and me can go and buy it, because it's an offense and a crime, so you'll be in jail, so don't even think about it. But I'm giving you knowledge about it, right? And that's why APTs are really concentrated on high value organizations. They concentrate upon, well, let's since it will be an expensive operation, so organizations who have a lot of financial backing, they go and involve in this kind of a practice. All right. So let's talk about the characteristics of APTs. So there are key 5 characteristics, right? And they make APTs quite different to root kills. The first is that they tend to be highly customized. So to a specific target or to a specific organization, to a specific sector, rather than being like a common code module and an association, basically it goes and makes it highly sophisticated, highly targeted, highly stealthy, So that way they can do very focused targeting. They go in and their goals are very long term also, because they go in and they do persistence and they stay in the system without being detected as long as they can, for which they have been basically designed to, rather than being the other way around, right? Also, they usually have multiple advanced scenarios which are packed with it, and often 0 day exploits are part of APT, through which the exploits basically start targeting and opening those doors. And as I mentioned before too, to get the exploits, there is always some forums, or there's some money involved, and they buy the exploits in many cases also, right? And their deployment is likely to be controlled or by some other kind of intervention, or by a human being. As I mentioned earlier, an example that was like a USB stick or an email, So always there's a human factor which opens that door and they get in, rather than any other way, a fully automation way and so forth, right? So they also operate in a low or a slow manner. So that's the whole thing about staying under the radar. So they are there, but they don't do anything. They could be in a stealthy mode for years. They won't even do nothing. And they are in, and then when the right time is there, then the command and control center will try to fire it up, or whatever the script, it'll ignite it, and then the information which they want to mine, it'll send to the C2, right? So they are stealthy and they go unnoticed, right? And also APT may have one or more objectives depending upon the source of the attack, and these may change over time also. Change over time, the economic, I will say, atmosphere of that organization, of the country, and so forth, right? So also an APT may be sent by an adversary to carry out espionage, which I mentioned to you earlier, against nation state targets, and with the intention of basically stealing sensitive information, highly, I would say, profile information, or highly sensitive information, right? It may be sent to cause, sabotage by disrupting the operation of a critical infrastructure system. I mentioned, you gave the example of, China, what it did, Iran, how US, and Israel kind of did a counter thing and got their nuclear plant compromised. And also such as, telecommunication system you can power down. You can also get the whole power grid down, for that matter. You can cut the water supply, anything. There could be any reason. You can pollute the water supply by changing the levels of chemicals in it, and so forth. There's a lot of things to look at, and APT must have a target behind it. An infiltrating target must be part of it, and also it needs a place to hide and then continue to operate. If it wants to succeed, it has to be persistent, right? So this requires it to be to have these certain 5 functions or characters. The first is it has command and control, the ability for a remote hacker to directly task and configure basically, and so that they can remotely use it. That's what C2, which I was still talking to you about. Also, it could be it can download a payload and also to provide malware updates and so forth. So by malware update means not your software updates, that malware is getting more intelligent because it wants, maybe it's not doing anything, it's just sitting, it's benign for the time being, it's sitting quietly, but it's doing its thing in the background. It is basically getting updates, and whatever the objective is, that is being handed over to it, and it receives, since it's very sophisticated, it updates itself, it gets intelligent, and it can then route itself to whatever the plan is from the command and control, right?